The rain fell steadily on the city streets, turning the sidewalks into shiny, reflective streams of light. Emily hurried along Main Street, her umbrella barely keeping her dry, her coat clutched tightly around her. The cafe at the corner, warm and inviting, was the first place she could think of to escape the drizzle. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, shaking off the water and letting the scent of coffee and pastries wrap around her like a soft blanket. It had been one of those days long, exhausting, and quietly lonely. Emily had spent hours at the library grading papers for the high school where she taught English. Her students were wonderful, yes, but today had been particularly difficult. One student had forgotten an assignment. Another had argued about grades. And yet another had been absent, leaving her scrambling to adjust her lesson plan. By the time she left the building, her mind felt heavy, her chest tight with a kind of tiredness that isn't just physical. It's emotional. She scanned the cafe and found a small table near the window. As she sank into the chair, she noticed the gentle hum of conversation around her, the clinking of cups and the low murmur of music playing softly in the background. It was ordinary, simple, and comforting. Yet somehow, Emily felt the weight of her own quiet solitude, even more acutely here among strangers. She opened her bag and pulled out her notebook, intending to write down some thoughts, to scribble a little escape from the heaviness pressing on her. Emily often wrote not for publication, not for anyone else, but for herself. Writing was her way of processing the world, of giving life to emotions she otherwise kept tucked away. Today, she didn't know what she wanted to write about. All she knew was that she needed a moment of calm, a pause in a life that sometimes felt too loud and too fast, just as she was about to sip her coffee. A sudden crash startled her. A man young, maybe in his late 20s, had stumbled through the cafe door, struggling with an umbrella that refused to cooperate. In one awkward motion, the umbrella struck Emily's coffee cup, sending it spilling across the table. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, bending quickly to help her. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to contain the mess, and his voice carried a genuine panic that made Emily pause. There was no arrogance here, no carelessness, just someone flustered and human, fumbling in a moment of clumsiness. It's okay," Emily said, laughing nervously to hide her surprise. She could see the redness creeping across his cheeks, the slight embarrassment in his eyes. Somehow, even in the chaos of a spilled cup, there was a strange warmth in his presence. He looked at her and smiled sheepishly. "Let me get you a new one," he said, and before she could respond, he was already moving to the counter. Emily watched him, a quiet curiosity stirring in her chest. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to this stranger, the way he moved, the way his voice carried a hint of awkward charm, the way he seemed genuinely concerned about her. It was a feeling she hadn't realized she'd been craving: connection, however fleeting, with someone who seemed to care, even in a small, clumsy way. As she sat there, Emily reflected on her own life. She had friends, colleagues who cared for her, a family she loved, but lately everything had felt distant, days blurred together, and nights were often quiet and lonely. She longed for something she couldn't quite name: a spark, a sign, a moment of serendipity that might shake her out of the monotony. And perhaps, without knowing it, this very moment was about to become that spark. The man returned, carrying a fresh cup of coffee. "Here," he said, his smile tentative but hopeful. "Hopefully, this one stays in the cup." Emily smiled back. "Thank you." "Really?" And in that brief exchange, there was a strange, silent acknowledgement, a shared awareness that life sometimes placed people in the right place at the wrong time. And perhaps, if you were lucky, it could also be the right time. As he apologized again, Emily realized she didn't want the moment to end. There was a flutter of something she hadn't felt in a long time: anticipation, curiosity, the tiny hope that maybe, just maybe, this accident was the start of something unexpected. The rain continued to fall outside, drumming gently against the cafe windows. Emily stirred her coffee, watching the ripples form and disappear, thinking of the unpredictable twists of life. She had no idea who this stranger was or what the future might hold, but for the first time in weeks, her heart felt just a little lighter. And as the man offered a shy smile and a nod before stepping toward another table, Emily sensed that this was only the beginning of a story. She hadn't yet imagined a story full of surprises, small mistakes, laughter, and perhaps, in time, something beautifully unexpected. The next morning, Emily couldn't shake the image of the stranger from her mind. His awkward smile, the way he had fumbled with the umbrella, even this small blush that had colored his cheeks all lingered in her thoughts like a song she couldn't quite finish. She kept replaying the moment at the cafe, wondering if she would ever see him again, coincidentally. Or perhaps by fate, the universe seemed determined to answer her silent question. That afternoon, Emily found herself wandering into the city's old bookstore, her favorite place for quiet reflection. Shelves packed with stories of love, adventure, and human triumph called to her. As she walked past the poetry section, she froze. Emily? She turned slowly, her heart skipping a beat. There he was, the stranger from the cafe, browsing through a small stack of novels with a slightly distracted air. The same gentle, awkward energy seemed to radiate from him. Only now it carried a quiet confidence, as if he belonged here, among the words and the soft smell of old paper. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Hi," he replied, eyes lighting up at the sight of her. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Me neither," Emily admitted, trying to hide her sudden excitement. "I come here often. It's my little escape." He smiled, and she noticed something different this time, a glimmer of recognition in his gaze. A hint that maybe he had been hoping for this moment too. "I was just looking for something to read." Poetry usually works better than anything else. As they walked together through the narrow aisles, quiet connection began to form, like two pieces of a puzzle finding each other. It wasn't immediate or explosive, it was subtle, growing from shared smiles, gentle laughter, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes words weren't necessary. As they stopped in front of a small section of classic novels, Emily's thoughts drifted to her own past. She remembered a similar feeling she had experienced years ago during high school, a time when she had met someone she thought she would spend forever with. But life had been cruelly busy, and their bond had faded, not because of lack of feeling, but because of circumstances beyond their control. She had carried the memory quietly, tucked away, but it always lingered, a reminder of what could have been. Alex She finally learned his name. After a hesitant exchange, noticed her hesitation. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, as if sensing the ghost of her past stirring. Emily shook her head slightly, smiling faintly. "Yes, just." "Remembering?" He nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "I know that look. I have memories like that too. Moments that feel so close, yet somehow unreachable." She looked at him, surprised by his empathy. It was rare to meet someone who understood the ache of nostalgia without prying, without judgment. For the first time in a long while, she felt a quiet comfort in sharing a small piece of her heart with a stranger. They lingered in the bookstore for hours, talking about favorite authors, cherished poems, and childhood dreams. Every story they shared revealed more of themselves, their hopes, the small heartbreaks they had survived, and the quiet resilience that had carried them through life. Emily found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor, feeling her chest lift in a way she hadn't felt in years. Yet, despite the growing connection, there were invisible walls between them. Emily noticed it in the way he paused sometimes, as if weighing his words carefully, and in the moments when her own hesitation held her back from saying too much. Life had taught both of them that closeness could be fragile and trust had to be earned slowly. Still, there was an undeniable pull, a magnetic current neither could resist, no matter how cautious they were as they stepped outside. The sun had begun to dip low, casting golden light across the streets. They walked together in companionable silence, the city alive with distant chatter, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, and the soft rustle of autumn leaves beneath their feet. Emily felt a quiet peace, a sense that, somehow, This connection, born from a spilled cup and shared smiles, was something rare and beautiful. Alex paused at the corner, turning to her with a shy but sincere expression. "I know we just met, but I'd like to see you again. Maybe tomorrow?" Emily felt a flutter in her chest. It's the same mix of excitement and nervous longing that had accompanied her many unspoken feelings in the past. "I'd like that," she said softly, realizing how simple and perfect the words felt as they parted ways. Emily walked home slowly, the memory of his smile lingering like sunlight on her shoulders. She thought about the strange way life worked, the accidents, the near misses, the unexpected meetings that seemed trivial at first but ended up shaping everything. And in that moment, she allowed herself to hope, carefully and cautiously, that this connection could blossom into something real, something lasting. A week had passed since Emily and Alex had met in the bookstore. Their brief afternoon together lingered in her mind like a delicate, song-soft, persistent, impossible to forget. Emily found herself glancing at the clock during her quiet moments at home, half expecting to see him appear at her doorstep, even though she knew it was too soon for anything like that. Yet, the thought of seeing him again filled her with a fluttering anticipation she hadn't felt in years. It was a Saturday morning when, fate or perhaps coincidence, decided to intervene. Emily had gone to the park near her apartment, a place she often visited to read or sketch when she needed a break from the hum of the city. The air was crisp, the trees just beginning to show the first hints of autumn, and the park was dotted with families, joggers, and the occasional stray dog. She settled onto a bench near a small fountain, pulling out her notebook to sketch the ripples in the water, lost in her drawing. She didn't notice the approaching footsteps until a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Emily." She looked up and her breath caught. There he was, Alex carrying a small canvas bag, eyes scanning the park until they landed on her. The same shy, nervous smile that had first captivated her a week ago spread across his face. And Emily felt her heart lift. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said softly, closing her notebook. "I come here sometimes," he replied, shrugging in a way that made him seem both casual and painfully aware of his own nervousness. "It's quiet. Good for thinking." Emily gestured to the empty space on the bench beside her. "Join me." He nodded, sitting down carefully as if he were afraid of breaking some invisible boundary. They exchanged a brief silence, letting the sounds of water splashing and children laughing fill the space between them. Then, as if drawn by the same invisible thread, they began talking. Alex mentioned a small art exhibition in the city, one that focused on local painters and poets. Emily listened, fascinated by the way he described the colors, the emotions, and the stories behind each piece. She realized that this wasn't just a casual interest for him, it was a passion. Something that reflected his heart and his quiet sensitivity. "You know," he said, "I almost didn't come today. I thought maybe it was too soon, or maybe it would be awkward." Emily looked at him, surprised. "Too soon?" He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Sometimes I overthink things. But then I thought, maybe some chances only come once." Chest tightened at his words. It was as if he had spoken directly to the small hope she had been nursing for herself. The hope that something meaningful could grow from the brief moments they had shared as they walked along the winding paths of the park. A small incident reignited a spark between them. A stray balloon caught in the wind floated toward them, and Alex instinctively reached out, catching it just before it drifted away. He handed it to Emily with a triumphant smile. "You saved it," she said, laughing softly. "I didn't even know it needed saving." He shrugged, his eyes twinkling. "Sometimes it's the little things that matter most." Emily's laugh lingered in the crisp air, and for a moment, everything else faded: the city noise, the lingering shadows of past disappointments, even the monotony of her routine. All that remained was this unexpected, tender connection, as though fate had carved a small, private space just for them. Yet, even as they shared this light-hearted moment, there was an unspoken tension, a quiet question lingering between them. Both had experienced life's unpredictable twists, the kind that left marks on the heart. Both had learned caution, sometimes to the point of hesitation. And yet, standing together in that park, the pull between them felt undeniable. It's impossible to ignore. They found a quiet spot beneath an old oak tree, its leaves shimmering in the afternoon sun. Alex turned to her, his expression serious yet gentle. "Emily, I know we don't know each other well, but I feel like I've known you longer than a week. Like somehow we were supposed to meet." Emily's eyes softened. She had thought the same thing countless times over the past few days. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's strange, but it feels right." The moment hung between them, delicate and fragile, like the pause between heartbeats. Neither needed to rush, neither felt the need to define anything immediately. The connection was enough: the shared laughter, the quiet understanding, the sense that someone truly saw them for who they were as they stood to leave. Alex offered his hand, a small gesture of trust and companionship. Emily took it, and together they walked toward the park exit, their steps in sync, hearts quietly echoing the promise of something new. Sometimes life didn't need grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it only required a small twist of fate, a coincidental meeting, and the courage to acknowledge the quiet stirrings of the heart. And for Emily and Alex, that small twist had opened a door, one that neither of them wanted to close. Days turned into weeks, and Emily and Alex continued to meet in small, seemingly ordinary ways. Sometimes it was a quiet morning coffee, sometimes a walk through the park, other times a shared bench at the library. Yet beneath the easy laughter and shared smiles, there lingered a quiet tension, words, unspoken emotions held back, and the subtle ache of longing neither fully admitted. Emily often found herself staring at her phone, her thumb hovering over the keypad. She wanted to write to Alex to tell him how much she enjoyed their time together, how the brief moments they shared felt brighter than the rest of her days. But every time she tried, a hesitation stopped her. What if she seemed too forward? What if she misread the signals and it all became awkward? And so she stayed silent, letting the feelings grow quietly, tucked away like fragile glass waiting to be handled. Alex, on his part, struggled in much the same way. He had never met someone who stirred such warmth in him, yet he found himself holding back. Life had taught him that vulnerability could be painful, and so he masked his deeper emotions behind humor and casual conversation. Still, every time he caught Emily looking at him with that gentle curiosity, he felt the tug of something stronger, something he had long denied himself the right to feel. One crisp afternoon, they found themselves at the same park where their paths had first crossed. Emily sat on a bench beneath the old oak tree, sketching the fading sunlight on the fountain, while Alex leaned against the railing nearby, pretending to read a book but really stealing glances at her. "I love how peaceful it is here," Emily said softly, not looking up from her notebook. "It's like the world slows down just for a moment." Alex nodded, his voice quiet. "Yeah, it's the kind of place where you can think, or maybe forget to think for a while." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things left unsaid. Emily wanted to ask him why he seemed so hesitant sometimes, why his smiles carried a hint of caution. Alex wanted to tell her that he cared more than he should, that the moments they shared were the brightest parts of his days. Yet neither spoke. Instead, Alex leaned closer, careful not to startle her. "Do you ever feel like we miss chances? That life keeps giving us signs, and we just walk past them?" Emily's pencil froze mid-sketch. She thought of the first spilled coffee, of the chance encounter at the bookstore, of every small coincidence that had drawn them together. "All the time," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think about the what-ifs, and sometimes I wonder if we even notice them when they happen." Alex's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to fall away. There was a raw, unspoken understanding in that geyser. Recognition that both of them were quietly longing for the same thing, but unsure how to reach for it. "I've been thinking about that," Alex said carefully, "about what we have, even if it's just this. And I want to say something, but I keep holding back." Emily's heart ached with anticipation. Holding back, why? He exhaled as if the words weighed heavily on him. Because sometimes I'm afraid. Afraid that if I say it, it'll change everything. Afraid that maybe I'm reading it wrong, and then I lose what we already have. Emily nodded slowly, understanding perfectly. She had felt the same fear herself, the quiet tug between hope and caution. She placed her hand gently on his arm. Alex, I think that's how it always is with people who matter. The moments that are worth taking. They come with a little fear. But maybe that's okay. He looked down at her hand, then back at her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't a confession, not yet. But it was a promise, a shared acknowledgement of the feelings neither had dared to name aloud. They sat together in silence for a while, letting the world move around them, letting the unspoken words settle in their hearts. The sunlight shifted, painting golden highlights in Emily's hair, and Alex felt a quiet surge of something he had kept hidden for too long. Hope, finally. Emily spoke, her voice soft but certain. Maybe we don't need to rush it. Maybe some things are meant to be felt before they're spoken. And maybe that's how we know they're real. Alex nodded, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. I like that, he said. It's comforting. As they left the park side by side, the unspoken truth hung between them like a delicate thread, strong, invisible, and full of promise. They didn't need to define it yet. They didn't need grand gestures or declarations. All they needed was this, the quiet understanding, the shared glances, the moments of connection that spoke louder than any. The city was quiet that evening, with the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on the rain-slicked sidewalks. Emily walked slowly, clutching her coat tighter around her, though it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. Her thoughts were tangled with weeks of hesitation, moments of laughter, and glances that said more than words ever could. Tonight she was meant to meet Alex at the small cafe where their story had first begun, but she couldn't shake the nervous flutter in her chest. Alex had arrived early, as usual, settling into their corner table with a cup of tea. His hands wrapped around it, seeking warmth, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying their past encounters. The way Emily's eyes had lit up when she smiled, the quiet way she listened when he spoke. And tonight, he knew he couldn't hold back any longer. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Emily stepped in, shaking off the drizzle and scanning the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. He rose slightly, and she walked toward him, her heart beating faster with each step. "Hi," she said softly, her voice barely above the hum of the cafe. "Hi," he replied, a small nervous smile tugging at his lips. There was something different in his expression tonight, a quiet determination, a vulnerability that made Emily's chest ache in the most familiar way. They sat across from each other, the small table between them crowded with 2 steaming cups of tea. Silence hung for a few moments, not awkwardly, but with the weight of emotions that had been held back for too long. Finally, Alex leaned forward, resting his elbows lightly on the table. "Emily, there's something I've been meaning to say," he began, his voice low and steady, though laced with the tension of nerves. "I've been afraid to say it, afraid it might change everything between us." Emily's pulse quickened. She had felt the same fear herself, the hesitation that came from caring deeply but fearing the unknown. She nodded gently, encouraging him to continue. "I care about you," Alex said finally, the words tumbling out as though they had been trapped for weeks. "More than I've let myself admit. And I know it's sudden in some ways, but every time I see you, every moment we spend together, it reminds me of what I've been missing. It reminds me that life is too short to hold back." Emily's eyes softened, her chest tightening with a mixture of relief and joy. "Alex, I feel the same way," she whispered. "I've been afraid too. Afraid of saying it first. Afraid of what might happen. But every time I'm with you, it feels right. Like this is how it's supposed to be." His shoulders relaxed slightly, and a small, genuine smile spread across his face. "I was worried I was imagining it," he admitted, his eyes searching hers. "I didn't want to risk losing even the small connection we have if I was wrong." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over his. The warmth of her touch carried all the words they hadn't spoken. The quiet longing that had built up over their meetings in the park, the bookstore, and the cafe. "You weren't wrong," she said softly. "This, us, it feels real, and I've been hoping you felt it too." A gentle pause settled between them, not filled with uncertainty this time, but with a shared understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of the bond that had quietly grown. For the first time, the fear that had held them back seemed unnecessary, replaced by something stronger: clarity, hope, and the courage to let their hearts speak. Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the soft glow of the streetlights framed the cafe windows. It felt as though the world had paused, waiting for this moment of truth. Alex squeezed Emily's hand lightly, a gesture of reassurance and connection. "Life hasn't always been easy," he said quietly, "and I know we both have moments we can't forget. But maybe that's what makes this even more important. We've been cautious, hesitant, but maybe the right thing now is to stop holding back." Emily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of relief, joy, and the quiet triumph of love finding its way. "I've been holding back for so long," she admitted, "and it's exhausting. But being here with you, knowing we feel the same, it makes all the fear worth it." Alex nodded, his expression soft and tender. "Then let's stop holding back," he said, a quiet determination in his voice. "Let's see where this can go together." And in that small cafe, over 2 steaming cups of tea, weeks of unspoken emotions finally found their voice. The moments of hesitation, longing, and quiet struggle melted into a turning point of realization that sometimes the most meaningful gestures are the simplest: honesty, courage, and the willingness to share the heart's deepest truth. As they left the cafe that evening, walking side by side under the soft glow of streetlights, the world seemed brighter, lighter. The turning point had arrived, not through grand declarations or dramatic events, but through the quiet, heartfelt acknowledgement of what had been there all along. Emily and Alex didn't need perfection. They only needed each other, and the courage to speak the words that had been waiting patiently for the right moment. For the first time, they felt the freedom to be themselves completely, and the promise of something beautiful unfolded quietly, gently, yet profoundly. The days after that night at the cafe felt different for Emily and Alex, lighter, softer, as though some invisible weight had been lifted from their hearts. The truth once spoken had changed everything. Not in an explosive way, but in a quiet, steady way that made the world around them seem calmer, more meaningful. Emily often found herself smiling at little things: the smell of fresh rain, the sound of footsteps echoing down the street, the hum of life outside her apartment window. There was peace in her chest now, where once there had only been questions. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew it finally felt right to hope. Alex, too, noticed how different the days felt. The hesitation that had once lingered in his thoughts was gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. He had spent so much of his life second-guessing his feelings, worrying about timing, about what could go wrong. But with Emily, it felt simple, not perfect, not without challenges, but genuine. And that was enough. They continued to meet, not always in cafes or bookstores, but in the ordinary moments that made life beautiful. Sometimes it was a walk through the park after work, leaves crunching beneath their feet as autumn settled in. Other times it was sitting by the river, watching sunlight ripple across the water, sharing quiet stories from their pasts, the mistakes, the regrets, and the dreams that still felt possible. One chilly afternoon, Alex surprised Emily by bringing her to a little art fair by the harbor. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts and sea salt. Artists had lined the walkway with paintings, photographs, and handmade crafts. Emily's eyes sparkled as she took it all in. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "I used to come to these when I was younger, but I stopped for a long time. I guess I forgot how much I loved things like this." Alex smiled. Maybe it's time to start again. They stopped at a booth where an older woman was selling hand-painted postcards. Each one was a small window into a different world. Sunsets, rainy streets, quiet country roads. Emily picked one up that showed two people walking beneath a single umbrella. The scene reminded her of that first evening she had run into Alex again. Both caught in the rain, both unsure of what the moment would mean. She smiled and turned to him. "This one," she said, holding it up. "It feels like us." He chuckled softly. "Then we should keep it." They bought the postcard and continued walking, their hands brushing occasionally, small touches that spoke volumes. It wasn't a grand romance filled with dramatic gestures. It was something gentler, something built on honesty and shared understanding. As winter crept closer, life grew busier. Emily's work demanded more time, and Alex had a few weeks of travel for his job. Yet, even when they were apart, they stayed connected through messages and late-night phone calls filled with laughter and soft silences. The kind of silences that didn't feel empty. They felt like presence. One evening, when Alex returned to the city, he stopped by Emily's apartment. She had just finished putting up a few holiday decorations. Nothing extravagant. Just a few string lights and a small wreath by the window. The warm glow filled the room, wrapping them both in quiet comfort. "I brought something," Alex said, pulling the postcard from his coat pocket. It was now framed simply, the image of the two figures under the umbrella, perfectly preserved. "I thought maybe it should have a proper place." Emily's eyes softened as she took it, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's beautiful. It's a reminder," Alex said, "that sometimes, even when things seem uncertain or messy, there's still something worth holding on to." She placed the frame on her shelf, beside a small candle that flickered softly. Then she turned to him and smiled, not the uncertain smile she used to wear, but one full of quiet confidence. "I'm glad we didn't let fear win," she said. "I'm glad we found our way here." Alex nodded, his voice warm. "Me too." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the light shimmer in the reflection of the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, slow and steady, blanketing the city in a soft white glow. The world seemed still, almost reverent, as if acknowledging the peace that had finally settled between them. In that moment, Emily realized something. Love didn't always come with fireworks or sweeping gestures. Sometimes it came quietly through shared tea, through honest words,